The New York Knicks are solidifying themselves as one of the top contenders in the Eastern Conference. And this is a stark change from last year, when they were honestly looking like a play-in team around this time. But ever since February of last year, they've made some huge trades, and their players have just taken huge leaps, like Jalen Brunson, who just got selected to his first ever All-Star game this season. It's looking really, really good for the New York Knicks. And in this video, I'm going to break down how this all happened, how the front office made the New York Knicks alive again. Let's dive right into it. So off, let's take it all back to 2019, because this is when the Knicks, as we know them today, started. Julius Randle signed from New Orleans for 3 years, $63 million back then, after being traded to New Orleans in the Anthony Davis trade. Now, he didn't play in New Orleans for much, but once he signed for the Knicks, he was an immediate contribution, and the Knicks' wins spiked up about 10 wins through the entire season, which is pretty huge considering that they hadn't made any other huge roster moves at the time. However, another thing that happened to 2019 is when Porzingis tore his ACL. He subsequently filed a trade request, and he was traded to the Mavericks mid-season in 2019 along with Tim Hardaway Jr., who was, at the time, believe it or not, a pretty big piece of this Knicks team. Additionally, the Knicks spent the entire 2019 season actively trying to tank to get Zion and create cap space to try and sign KD and Kyrie. They failed in both regards, but that was another lost season for them. Now, the next domino that fell was the firing of longtime president/GM Steve Mills, who oversaw all of the Knicks' struggles in the 2010s. They then subsequently hired Leon Rose in 2020, and then hired Tom Thibodeau after that. And for those of you who don't know, Tom Thibodeau is the coach of the New York Knicks. Next, you have the entire 2021-22 season, where the team basically fell off of a cliff because of regression from Julius Randle and the lack of a good point guard. But then the offseason came around, and the Knicks signed Jalen Brunson. Now, many people did not like this. The NBA media and community just saw him as a backup option to Luka, as he was basically his entire career. And honestly, they thought that he was going to be bad. No one expected him to break out like he has, and it's been really impressive that he's done what he's done. Then, of course, you have some more niche details. You have Evan Fournier, who is honestly been pretty bad for them. He used to be a solid contributor for them, but then the Knicks suddenly benched him, and this was disliked by most of the NBA community, but it was immediately understood when the Knicks literally skyrocketed in wins right after it. They turned it around last season because of his benching. That was a huge part of their, well, I wouldn't say that it was a postseason run because it didn't last too long, but it was a huge part of getting to the postseason. Teams' 2021 and 2023 playoff performances were pretty impressive. I mean, last year they made it to the second round only to be beat by the eventual final bound Heat, and they've been pretty good. So how did all this happen? Well, I mentioned Julius Randle, I mentioned Jalen Brunson, but now we need to mention OG Anunoby. Because, as we all know, the Knicks traded for him a few weeks ago from the Toronto Raptors for Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett. Now, the Knicks and Raptors both also traded away smaller assets, but basically there's not much else in that trade. There's OG's far bigger length and better fit compared to RJ Barrett, which was pretty huge for the Knicks. I mean, they needed defense desperately. In this team with Jalen Brunson, as we all know, Jalen Brunson is undersized. He is a small guard, and he can't play great defense. This entire team is pretty small except for Julius Randle, and getting such a good defender in OG Anunoby has proved huge for them. And then there was the trade deadline, and this is what I think really propelled them up to that contenders level. Because yeah, sure, with OG Anunoby, they were a very good team. Last year, they were a good team, but just couldn't make it all because of injuries and stuff. But this year, it's looking extremely good for them. They are sitting very pretty after they acquired Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks from the Pistons for, now this one isn't great, but Quentin Grimes, who was a huge piece, Ryan Arch, Evan Fournier, Malachi Flynn, and 2 seconds. They basically fleeced the Detroit Pistons, but at the same time, it's not a fleece because of the way that the Pistons are heading. It doesn't seem like they're going to need pretty old players like Bojan. But at the same time, Bojan is a great shooter. Alec Burks is a great facilitator. The New York Knicks got themselves some steals with this trade, and it looks pretty good. But now, when you look at their schedule, they've lost their last 3 games. So you might be saying, well, why are you just lying to us? No, we'll make that 4 games. It's because Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle have been injured. In fact, Julius Randle was so injured that he couldn't even play in the All-Star game, which is pretty huge. They lost these games also by not very large margins, showing that they can still be good without their star players. And before this losing streak, they had a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-game win streak before this. And they've had streaks like this throughout the entire season, and mainly ever since they've got OG Anunoby. They had a 5-game win streak literally the day after they got him, and that recent 9-game win streak was looking huge for them. They are one of the favorites in the East. Like, just look at the conference. Who's going to beat them? The main teams in the Eastern Conference that are poised for contention this year are as follows: Celtics, Cavs, Bucks, Sixers, Pacers, and maybe you can throw in a wild card of the Heat. Now, I'm going to go and break down why every single one of these are just not good teams to choose on. Because the Celtics, sure, they're a great team, and honestly, they might be the only team that I don't really have much to say bad about. But at the same time, this Knicks team is also really good. Then you have the Cavaliers. The Knicks literally beat them last year, so if they just continue what they did last year, it should be an easy series for them. Then you have the Milwaukee Bucks, who have just been falling apart recently ever since hiring Doc Rivers. They're 3-7 in the last 10, and honestly, they are horrible. They're falling apart in front of our eyes, and the Knicks will easily be able to beat them. Next, you have the 76ers. Now, if Embiid comes back, this is a scary team, but with Embiid out for the foreseeable future, I don't see them playing the Knicks anytime soon, even though that would be the current playoff matchup if we went into the playoffs right now. Then you have the Pacers, who are the most likely team that the Knicks will play coming into the NBA playoffs. And this is a good team, but the Knicks just match up better against them. They have much more depth, and the Knicks, and the Pacers, they have Tyrese Halliburton, who's been playing really, really bad recently, and they have Pascal Siakam. That's about it. Their current last 10 is 5-5, which is the same as the Knicks, but they haven't had the injuries that the Knicks are going through. And finally, the Heat. Well, I called them our wild card team for a reason. I doubt they're even going to make it past the first round. Anyways, that was my take on the Knicks' current situation. Leave a like if you enjoyed and agreed with this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.